Hello, this is Connie Reguli, and the people who have followed me and know me know that I was an attorney in Middle Tennessee for nearly 30 years. And I got defrocked by the system, but that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. Through the course of my representation, I have had the opportunity to work with so many people who have just amazing life stories of survival, and I have a lot of deep respect for those who have survived, especially the system and intra-family abuse. So I have a client that I've worked with. She has a story that's been very disturbing to me. And I have asked her to document her story and to tell you about it. And along the way, I'm going to talk to you about all the different ways that the system has failed her. So I have with me today Crista. She's such a sweetheart, and I'm just happy she's a survivor, so that she's able to be here. So, all right, so first of all, Crista, I want to go back right now to the very beginning, and I'm going to tell everybody, you're going to see, although at the beginning you're going to go like, oh, wow, oh, that's not good. But as you hear more and more of this story, you're really going to be gasping by the time it's over. And I mean, the entire system has failed her, and she's still fighting it, and she's still alive and here today. So, Crista, I want to go back to the beginning. And you were an adopted child, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And talk to me about the process of being adopted. I know you were a baby at the time, right?
I was.
So you don't really, of course, have any personal memory of that. But
I do not.
But as you grew up, do you now know like who the adoption agencies were, the process that went through for that to happen?
Yes, ma'am. I was adopted through the Southern Baptist Convention when I was 3 weeks old.
Wow. And what year was that?
That was back in 1972.
Yeah. So do you now know about your birth parents?
I do. Yes, they were young. So.
Okay. And do you, so in your particular case, the Department of Children's Services was not involved in that adoption. Is that right?
Not that I know of.
Okay. And you were adopted by who?
Donald and Doris Haynes.
And they reside in what county?
Wilson County.
And that's in Tennessee.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you were adopted at 3 weeks old, and tell me just a little bit about Donald. What did he do for a living? Where in Wilson County did you live? Were you in the city, on a farm? Just tell me a little bit about what that environment was like.
Yes, he worked for DuPont, which was in kind of like Madison, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And we lived in Mount Juliet on the lake. And, you know, growing up, I guess from another person's standpoint, it looked normal, but it was anything but normal.
So some of the people be watching this may not know about Mount Juliet and the lake. So you're talking about Old Hickory Lake?
Yes, ma'am.
And I will say, as somebody who's been around Tennessee for a while, having a lake property is pretty, I mean, it's pretty spectacular here in Middle Tennessee.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, we have a couple lakes right here. We have Percy Priest, and people really can't live on that because I think it's a TVA lake. But the Old Hickory Lake, there are homes around it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they charge a pretty penny for those. So yeah, like you said, from the outside, it would have looked like a pretty idyllic family.
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
They had
Absolutely.
this pretty little girl.
Oh, thank you.
And how old were they when they adopted you? Do you know?
I believe that they were, I think Doris Haynes was probably in her late 20s and Don was in his early 30s.
Wow. Wow. And they had no other children.
No, Doris was told that she couldn't have children. They had tried for many years, and so that's why they had adopted me.
Wow. All right, so let's talk about when it starts to go bad. So what happened?
Well, my first memories, I believe, is when I was maybe 3 or 4. It's kind of hard to, remember. But my first memories were of being sexually abused.
And can you just share some of that with people? And I'll tell you why, is because I have, over the years, I have worked with so many families where there's been sexual abuse involved and with children. And I mean, I know how this is perpetrated. is kind of an important part of the story. I mean, our purpose of telling your story, and of course, just helping you kind of talk through that, and you know, I know it's got to be hard just to understand why me. I mean, I can't even imagine, but you know, sharing that story, an important part is for people to understand how that happens in a home. What is that? Are there manipulations? Are there tales told to children? Are the people, you know, did he slip in your bed? I mean, can you share some of that, what your memories are about that?
Yes, ma'am. I remember it was on my birthday, and the only reason that I remember that is because there were pictures, you know, and I had presents around and that sort of thing. So I remember the dress that I had on. That was, you know, I just looked back at I looked back at the pictures, and I could remember the colors of my dress, and just, we were alone, and, you know, he slipped up my dress, and I mean, you know, took off, you know, my underwear, and, you know, showed me, you know, his privates and everything, and that really stayed in my mind. I remember that.
Okay, so
completely.
so you have a memory that it was your birthday.
Yes, ma'am.
So you remember that part of it, and I mean, do you remember there being a party? And you know, I'll tell you again, I know from working with a lot of children as well that memories of abuse are very odd, because whenever you have a traumatic event in your life, a severely traumatic event, there are certain memories that seal, there are certain things that seal in your memory, but then there are other things that may not, right? And so, like, and if you're having, especially for children, if you're having a rather what I would call ordinary day, right, you may not remember what happened 30 minutes before you were sexually assaulted, because it's not a memory that got sealed, but you may remember, I mean, that may be the moment you remember when he took your dress off, and then, you know, was undressing you, and then it became, and then he made it something more than just helping you change clothes, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So even as a 3-year-old, there's some point in that where you have this feeling that there's something not right, not comfortable, right? I mean, can you help us with that? Can you explain that?
I just knew that it wasn't right. It just didn't feel right. You just get that gut feeling, even as a young child, you know. It was just done in private. You know, it just didn't feel right. It made me, you know, feel weird. Now, I didn't, as a child, and the man that's supposed to be protecting you, I couldn't really put all that together. And, you know, I didn't know, you know, but as growing up, I thought that was the norm. And that's really sad, you know, that I thought that's what, you know, that's what.
Yeah, so let's talk about how that developed. So on this first experience, was there actual touching involved?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so, and did he have an erection?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and did he touch you as well?
He did.
And did he penetrate? Do you remember?
Digitally, yes, ma'am.
And did he talk about it? Did he tell you what he was doing? Do you have any memory of him telling you why or not to tell? Or where was your mother?
I have no idea. She had to have been there because it was my birthday, and I don't know if there were other people there. I mean, I don't remember. Maybe it was after people left.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, and I understand, because like a child who's having a normal day and then gets sexually assaulted, the normal day doesn't seal in your memory, right?
Yes, ma'am. Definitely.
And the reason that this is important that we talk about that is because a lot of times if children have to testify, that's how the defense beats them up, right? Like, you don't remember where you were, you don't remember where your mother was, you didn't know where your mother was, you know? Right. And that's how they destroy children when they're trying to prosecute these kinds of crimes.
Right, exactly.
So after that birthday, and it was when you turned 3 or 4, do you remember?
I think it was 3, but it might have been 4. I was really young. So.
And it was at that same house?
No, actually, we lived in Gladeville at that point. So, and then we moved to Mount Juliet. So,
okay, so this was
two
before,
houses.
Okay, so this is before you moved to the lake.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so after that happened the first time and you felt uncomfortable, did you talk to anybody about it? Did you tell anybody?
Somehow I just intuitively knew that you didn't talk about it. Maybe he did tell me to not say anything, but again, I kind of thought that was normal in a way. He was showing me affection, and I mean, to me, and so I just didn't say anything, and it started happening all the time. So, you know.
Do you recall any memories where you were maybe embarrassed to tell anybody? Was that an emotion that you can recall as part of that process?
Well, yes, ma'am. I felt, well, I'm not going to say ashamed at that moment, but it just didn't seem like something that, you know, you would talk about. I didn't hear anyone else talking about anything like that. So this wasn't something you would really, or that I would bring up. So.
All right. So after that first time, then what happened as far as the frequency, the where, the how it was happened? I mean, at some point he's with you alone, your mother is somewhere. So then go forward from that time. Kind of what are your memories of how it continued to?
It just continued to escalate as I got older, you know. As I got older, you know, he just started doing more things, you know, to me, you know, you know, you know, my mouth was growing bigger, so there were more things that, you know, that I was able to do for him.
So, I mean, ultimately, there was oral sex involved?
Yes, ma'am.
Ultimately, there was, there was penetrating sex involved?
No, ma'am. At the very end, when I was 13, he never like thrust, you know, or anything like that, but he would definitely, you know, rub himself, you know, on, you know, my privates and everything. But when I discussed this with, you know, authorities, I discussed, excuse me, the 6 times that it escalated, and all of those 6 times, you know, that I talked about it, were the 6 times that he was indicted, and the 6 times that he said, yes, that happened.
Okay. Okay. And that's so ultimately that was at what age for you? How old were you when those events happened with him?
Well, I was from age 3 to 13.
Okay.
So, it escalated every couple of years as I got older and was, you know, growing, you know, and that sort of thing. Then, you know, as I began developing and.
But the events that we haven't quite gotten there yet, and we are going to talk about the investigation, but the events that he was ultimately indicted on, and you said 6 events, were those within a cluster of time period, those 6 events? You know,
yes, ma'am. 10 years from age 3.
Basically. No, I mean those particular 6 events. Were they closer to when you were age 13? Because you talked about the undressing himself, having an erection, using his erect body parts to rub against you in your genital areas, occurred multiple times over a period of years. This wasn't just like a peak escalation.
Oh,
right?
No, ma'am. It happened hundreds of times.
Okay. Okay. Now, do you at any point in those remember anywhere where your mother was?
You know, she would go out and shop, you know, like grocery shop on the weekends. She was a stay-at-home mom, so I'm not really sure why she chose the weekends, you know, to go shop. But I remember her being, you know, in the house in other rooms. There is absolutely no way that she did not know what was going on. And I also remember when I was in 2nd grade, I had a teacher that asked me to draw a picture of our family. And so I did. And my picture was immediately taken up, and the teacher called, you know, Doris, and said, you need to come in and see what I drew. and I drew a picture of Don and I in a hammock, and all you could see was his penis, you know, sticking up and my hands on it. So at age, in second grade, the red flags were there, and Doris never asked me. I mean, she still to this day admits that.
And was anything done as a result of you drawing that picture?
Nothing.
Nothing was done.
Nothing.
That is amazing. So that would have been about what year? You were born in 72, so 79?
Something like
1980. And so, and you said second grade, you think?
Yes, ma'am.
So probably 7, 8 years old?
Yes, ma'am, exactly.
Did they put you in counseling at any point, at that point?
I believe I went to counseling when I was, again, this is an approximate, I guess probably about 10 or 11, because I was acting out, you know. I was trying to get help.
Okay, yeah, so let's come up to that period of time. First of all, let's go back to these events. Did they always occur in the same place? Like same room?
Well, yes, ma'am. Well, we had different rooms in the house when we moved to the lake, and for some reason we changed up rooms all the time, or not all the time, but they were all great rooms. So, but it happened in basically every room, but there was a certain room that was my room, and it happened a lot, you know, there. So
you go through from 3, you start school, you draw this picture at 7. Is there anything else that you remember between 3 and 7 where you ever tried to say anything to anybody, or do you have any memory of that? And maybe you don't remember.
You know, I have a couple of friends, high school friends, that I have connected with, you know, lately, and they tell me that I actually would cry all the time, and I don't really remember this part, but they said that I cried, and that they knew that I actually kind of told them that I was being abused, but their mind wouldn't go around it, you know, or anything like that. But they remember me drawing the picture. 2 of them remember me drawing the picture and showing it to them before the teacher.
It was early as second grade.
Yes, ma'am.
So were you in the, when did you move from Gladeville to Mount Juliet? How old were you?
6 years old.
6, okay. So you didn't really attend school in Gladeville, is that correct?
I believe it was kindergarten.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so then after you started to say that when you got a little older, like 10, 12, you started to act out.
Yes, ma'am.
So what do you remember about acting out? What did you do?
Oh, I was like sneaking out of the house. I ran away a couple of times, just trying to, you know, get away from Don, you know, Donald and everything. I was really, like I said, just trying to get into some kind of trouble so somebody would ask me, you know, what was going on, because obviously Doris wasn't protecting me, and, you know, Don told me if I told anyone that I was the one that was going to get in trouble.
So ultimately he did say words to you like that, because you said at the very first you don't really remember those words, but at some point you remember him talking to you about you're going to get in trouble if you tell anybody. Do you remember how old you were when he finally started dealing with it that way, started talking to you about it?
Right before I basically told on him, and then Doris started threatening me as well after she really found, So
you start acting out and running away and misbehaving at school, or, were you?
Mostly just running away or sneaking out at night
from
and
home,
stuff like
right?
that. Yes, ma'am.
Were you a good student?
You know, I was in like the gifted class and everything. And then when all this started falling apart, I started, you know, not applying myself at school.
So what grade are we talking about when you started to fall apart?
About 6th grade.
Wow.
6th, 7th grade. Yes, ma'am.
Hitting puberty.
Yes, ma'am. And that's really what scared me, you know, too, as well, was in a little girl or in a teenager mind, you know, you start, you know, developing and not knowing really.
Well, you're unsure with your body anyway.
Yes,
right?
ma'am. And I'm thinking, could he I didn't know really a lot, believe it or not, about sex. And I'm thinking, could I have a baby?
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
like that really scared me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
And
of course.
I looked at my sister and thought he could be doing it. It was the same age as it started with me.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to save her, you know.
So when you reach puberty, I mean, it's different for boys and girls, but I know, just going to talk about girls. There's that whole transition with your body for puberty with girls is, you know, it's, and of course your hormones go crazy and your emotions start to get wild anyway, and you're very temperamental. And I say that just because I've raised so many.
Yeah.
And I've been one. But, and then to have this, like you say, the whole process in your mind about, well, this is sex. This is sex is what he's doing to me. And, you know, sex can make babies. And so what he's doing to me could make a baby. I mean, even whether he was actually doing real sex, thrusting inside, penetrating at the time, you certainly would have that trying to figure out what that process was as you mature into a woman.
Yes, ma'am.
And so then that accompanied with your just inability to know what to do, right? Because now I'm assuming this is about the time that he starts telling you, if you tell anybody, you better not say anything.
Yes.
So did you get the feeling that him saying that to you was a result of you starting to act out? I mean, is that when he started kind of saying that to you, and he saw that you were acting out a little bit and maybe not staying in line, and then that's maybe when he started saying, you know, if you can't say anything, right?
Yes, ma'am. I guess probably he realized that he couldn't control me anymore, or yes, that he was losing control, you know, and also that, you know, obviously this is not normal, you know, this is not normal behavior. I was not really allowed to, you know, go to my friend's house. My friends were not, I didn't want my friends to come over, you know, to my house, because it was always up to me to try to protect my friends. And then come to find out, he sexually abused one of my other friends. Gosh. That just came out just a couple months ago. So,
in your house?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh my gosh. How old was she?
She was in, I believe, like 2nd or 3rd grade.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Donald Haynes was about 32 years old or so when he adopted you. So this would have started when he was probably about 35.
Yes,
right? You were about 3. He was about 35, and we're talking the next 10 years. So we're going to a man who's going from age 35 to 45 or so, right? And then you find out, I mean, gosh. So by the time, if it started when you were 3 and he was 35, and then you said you had a friend in your house who was in 2nd grade. So, I mean, he was almost 40 by the time that occurred, right? I mean, this, you know, I just say this because, I mean, it's always wrong, and I don't ever justify it, but, you know, you can't say at 40 years old, you're just a hot hormone teenager, right?
Correct. Right. Yeah.
You know, so this is, you know, this is a 40-year-old man who did this, and then goes up to the time he's 45. All right. So then ultimately, at some point, you do disclose it. You do talk about it to somebody. Okay. So unfold for us now how that happens.
Yes, ma'am. So I went to counseling, and I just found this out. The counselor that I went to didn't know why I was going to counseling. Now, I figured that being that Dawn and Doris both were taking me to counseling, that this lady would have to know why I was going to counseling. I figured one of them told her why. I just found out just recently that she had no idea why I was going to counseling, or else she would have turned him in. But she didn't know. And, you know, I started seeing her again after I had moved back from Chicago.
Okay, so you're going to this counselor, though, and what do you remember about that process? What did you say to her? I
didn't say a word to her. I
so
was
you
too
didn't
scared.
tell her.
I was too scared. I'd been threatened.
And and you were in school, so you would have been a young, like middle school, young high school.
Yes, ma'am.
At that time when you started counseling. And did you, were you doing okay otherwise? I mean, were you in school, you were doing okay in grades,
Yes, ma'am.
Involved, I think you said in cheerleading. And you had friends at school?
I had more boy, just always had a boyfriend, that sort of thing. So,
but you don't have any recollection of having like slumber parties at your house?
Oh, I would not allow slumber parties at my house. No, I didn't want any of my friends at my house.
Oh, it's not funny, but
oh no, it's okay. I just felt like my whole life I felt like I had to protect anyone
who came around.
Even in my
so
30s.
do you remember going to anybody else's house and girls having other girlfriends like that? No,
they wouldn't allow that either, because they didn't want me to slip up and tell someone.
Well, true, right?
So I was very sheltered. Yes, ma'am.
Right. And I mean, I would assume by this time period, like you said, we've already talked about how as you reach puberty, you began to feel more uncomfortable, like this is sex. I mean, once you start processing that and you start learning a little bit about sex education, now you're like, so, and then your body's uncomfortable and you're more emotional and you're trying to readjust in a whole, that whole middle school. Of course, I think middle school is like the hardest thing ever. I think that is like,
it is.
That's like the worst time of your life, is like 6th grade to 8th grade.
It is.
And because you're in you're in a whole population that's going through this whole hormonal shake up.
Very true. Yes.
And it's crazy. So, all right. So then you're kind of isolated.
Very.
I mean, did you have like other cousins or anything like that? No. So you really were isolated during that time. All right. So at some point your mom does have a baby.
She does. Yes.
And how old were you when your baby sister was born?
I was 13.
And yeah, so that plays into
Or no, excuse me. So she's 10 years younger than I am. So I was 10.
10.
Excuse me.
You were 10. So when she was born, I mean, do you recall, you were 10, this was still happening to you, and you didn't, I mean, still pretty young. I mean, 10 still where you're really you're really concrete, at 10. It's like, I'm me and the rest of the world is the rest of the world, right? I mean, as a child, you still have that child concrete mentality. And and it goes everything from this is my candy to nobody else needs any candy to the whole world, right? I mean, it goes to this type of situation that you were in, I wouldn't expect you as a 10-year-old at 10 to think he could be doing this to other people. You just wouldn't be processing that way.
Well, I really tried to take care,
Oh, so you did protect her and keep her close to you.
Yes, even then I wanted to baby her. I wanted to,
good.
I was like, she's my little baby doll. And,
well, this other friend who was a friend of yours at 7, was she in your house when that happened to her?
Yes, ma'am.
So, and you didn't realize it. She didn't say anything.
I just found this out in February of this year.
Wow. So see, he was able to somehow manipulate that situation. Crazy. Okay, so your sister's born, you're 10, you feel protective over her.
Absolutely.
And then she turns 3, and now this other connection makes in your brain. You're still tolerating some of this. Obviously, you're acting out, and obviously he's getting more, there's some frustration there with him, and his victim is not being quite so cooperative anymore. Right. And do you remember resisting him at all, or during that time period, you didn't feel like you were able?
Oh, I did not. I mean, he was,
he's your dad.
Adult. Yes.
And he's your dad, and he's 40.
Right.
Okay, so she turns 3, and this causes more anxiety for you.
Yes.
And what happened as a result of that?
That's when I actually did run away, run away, and you know, they found me, and I was told that, you know, because I had ran away, that I was going to have to go. This is back in the day, so they called it reform school.
Oh, yeah.
So they told Don and Doris to
So
me.
82.
86.
Oh, 13. Okay,
yes,
so
ma'am.
1986. Okay, go ahead.
1986, and it was in Lebanon. It was the old courthouse, which is now like the DMV, you know. And I went and met with this man, and he showed me the reform school and tried to scare me and everything. And, you know, then he asked me if there was a reason, you know, why that, you know, I was acting out. And, you know, I told him, I said, you know, because Donald Haynes is, you know, sexually touching me. And, you know, back then things are a lot different, you know. So he was like, so what you're telling me is if I go ask him that, you know, that he's going to say yes. And I said, well, you know, as a 13-year-old, I was like, we'll go ask him because, you know, that's what he's doing. And he said, you're going to be in a lot of trouble if he says no. And, you know, I said, well, go ask him. So back then, like I said, things are totally different. We go into the room. Don and Doris are standing there. He asks,
and you were there too?
I was standing right there.
And what kind of room are you in? Is this like a courtroom, or is this like an interview room?
It was a courtroom back in 1986, but of course no one was there except the 4 of us.
Well, I mean, and I'm going to say I've been in that old courthouse. When I started practicing law, they were still using that old courthouse.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that old courthouse up on the 2nd floor, that courtroom was pretty big.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's, I mean, it had like a lot of, is that the courtroom, the one up there? You don't remember?
No, ma'am, I don't remember that part. I just remember we were in a courtroom, because I'd never been in a courtroom before, you know, and he asked.
But there's a place where there's a bench for a judge. You kind of remember that part of it.
Yes,
right?
ma'am. But we were just down. Like,
yeah, right, sure. You know. And so were any other people there besides just you guys?
No one else was there.
So this man, you're not sure who it is, as you said here today, right?
No, ma'am.
And yourself and Don and Doris, is your sister there?
No.
Okay, and what happened?
This man asks, you know, Donald Haynes if he, you know, was actually sexually abusing me, and Donald Haynes said yes. And Doris was right there, you know, and like I said, I didn't really know if she knew, but again, then I've remembered the drawings and my, you know, cries for help, you know, and everything. And if you didn't know, you should have known. I mean,
so did she deny it? Or did she not say anything?
She just didn't say anything.
She didn't say anything.
But I just remember the long ride home that night, and she explained to me that Don had to go home and pack his bags, and she didn't ask me anything. She still, to this day, of course we're estranged, but she never asked me what happened. And of course we'll get to this, but in her report in 2020, when she was interviewed, she admitted that she still had never asked me what happened. Wow.
And so did he leave the house that day?
Come to find out, which I just found out, he did leave. He was in the Coast Guard, so they allowed him out of the state to Florida to go on active duty for 6 weeks. And yeah, I know. And he was out of the home for 6 weeks, and then he came back.
Wow.
According to the files, we should reunification.
Okay. All right, so we're going to close out this tape, because this is about 30 minutes, and I like to keep it right around 30 minutes. I'm going to restart it, so y'all hang in there. If these are posted separately, it'll be part 2. This is the end of part 1. And so what you have heard now is that she was adopted by Donald Haynes and his wife through the Baptist Convention, and at 3 years old, became a victim of sex abuse intrafamily by her father repeatedly over years. And ultimately, at 13, she had this opportunity to confront him. So next, we're going to talk about what happened after that.